Hey guys, Darren Kelly, coach of Wide Ocean Pods, and welcome to a new series on my channel where we will be discussing the player positions in AFL Fantasy as we continue through the fantasy preseason of 2025. In this series, I will be going through each position, each line in AFL Fantasy, defenders, midfielders, rucks, and forwards, providing one video per line, just really going through all of the fantasy relevant players that we need to discuss, your primos, your undervalued primos, your mid prices, and I'll throw in a few rookies here and there as I feel. But yeah, in today's episode, we will be discussing the rucks first up, so let's get into it. So before we get into the individual players, I really just wanted to have a quick chat around the strategy around how we set up in terms of our ruckman. It's a pretty vital line in my opinion, probably the vitalist of all lines in AFL Fantasy because there is only 2 slots on field and you get very quickly locked into a structure when you select a certain way you want to play, which I'll get into in a second. So it becomes very difficult to sort of change up the way you want to go about it if you lock in a player that you want to go with. So the obvious question that we need to answer is, are you going with set and forget, one primo and one value, or are you just going 2 value rucks to start with? That's the 3 sort of strategies and structures that you can go with. And it's probably more vital than ever in terms of this season because there are so many different options that we're looking at. A lot of players, a lot of coaches, at this time of the year are locking in set and forget. And I think that's sort of the same strategy that happens a lot to start the season. A lot of people just feel going with the comfortable option that's the safest. We've got proven scorers in a Marshall and a Cherry that went pretty big last year, and there's probably no reason why they couldn't do that again. But we know that the way that fantasy is played is finding value to start off the season. That's the way the new game runs, and that's where most of the success comes from. So we're always hunting for the value. So that's the interesting part there. A lot of people are looking for that value option, which we'll get into. There is plenty of value to go with. It's just what is the safest option and what's the most likely, in my opinion. But I'll just quickly go through what set and forget is. So set and forget is going with the 2 top ruckmen, pretty much that you're confident they're going to be the top 2 to finish the season or throughout the season. This ideally minimizes how much trade you're going to be locking in that line. Pretty much it'd be locking in Marshall and Cherry, and you're pretty much confident they're going to be top 2 the entire year. They're going to provide massive scores for you. They're going to be captain options, and you're not going to have to use any trades barring injury in that line. And like I said, using trades in this line can be quite tricky because, like I said, if you were to go with a much cheaper ruckman, let's just go with one down here. If Stanley was to not perform as well as you wanted, or he either got an injury or one of those riskier factors, then you're really looking for 500, 600k to try and jump up to the next best or those top line guys. And that's really difficult to find. That pretty much requires you to have a full restructure in fantasy to try and get that cash, which is really difficult, especially early on in the season. It can be quite season defining. So that's why a lot of people are going with set and forget at this point in time, because it is very comfortable. If one of these guys were to get injured, then you've got the money on top of their head to be able to go down, and you'd be able to spend up elsewhere if things were to go wrong quite early. And like I said, they're huge captain options, so you're pretty much banking on them to be consistent all year. They're going to provide massive scores, and you're not expecting them to drop a huge amount in their average. Like, a Marshall, he's gone back to back on 15 plus in his averages, so he's pretty much certain that he's going to be around that mark again, unless a few things change, which we'll get into. And same with Cherry, he's went 114.5. He's on the up, having a breakout season. So you can pretty much be confident that they're going to be around that mark in terms of being top 2. But this probably hasn't been the way that where the most success has happened in the last couple of years. If we look back to 2024, English was the most expensive ruckman to start the year at 118, I believe, average. He's dropped down to 104, so he had a massive decrease with just a bit of a struggling year with injuries and a few ruck rules changing that really didn't benefit him. So that would have really hurt you and wouldn't have been the best way to go about it if that's the way you started the season. So it does pay off to search for value because it can really boost you up the season. So, and even if you go back to 2023, Max was the top ruckman to start, but a lot of people luckily didn't start him like that year because Brody Grundy got traded into the Melbourne side. So luckily no one really jumped on him, but he massively dropped down in average as well. I think down to 90 from like 100 and something. So it does pay not to always go with the top ruckman because there is a likelihood that they're going to dip for many different factors, which we'll get into. The other option of a strategy or a structure, if you want to say that, is one primo and one value option, and that is going with, having one secure guy that you're confident that is going to be a top 2 ruckman or top 3, however you want to look at it, is going to be that top echelon as a premium, and then you're really searching for that value, like I said before. We'll just go Sean Darcy as an example. He's a pretty popular name to start this season. This is probably the one that has worked in the past couple years, in my opinion. We only have to look back to last year where you had the likes of Max and Cherry being the underpriced guy, the value option, and Max being that pretty much that underpriced premium that we all knew he could be, with a few things changing in that team. So we had confidence that Max would be around that top 2 mark, and Cherry was just that value pick, and we probably didn't expect him to be as good as he was, but the sky was a limit for him, and he just went absolutely ballistic. You could throw Grundy in there as another primo option that we were considering, and a lot of us started, because again, he was the ruck pick back at Collingwood, so he was definitely one that you would consider a primo in that. But again, they did both present a lot of value because they were underpriced after spending 12 months together at Melbourne. So, and even prior to that, in 2023, we had English and Marshall. I would say that they were both primos. Marshall was probably the one that was a value, in my opinion. English was averaging 100, so he was in that top echelon of premium, so he was the premium in that one. And then Marshall, losing Paddy Ryder due to retirement, priced at 91, we just knew he was going to definitely increase, so he was the value option in that. So that's where I feel like that's the best way you're going to get the most success out of your fantasy team, really looking at this one primo and one value option. It's like sitting on the fence a little bit because you've got a little bit of risk, but you've got quite a bit of safety in one option, so you're not really risking your fantasy season. Whereas with the 2 value options, so I'll show you that again. Let's just go Draper for the fun of it. Now you've got 2 guys that are potential very risky. They're nowhere near the top line guys. They're down this low for a reason, due to injury or due to role. There's many different factors why they're not performing the way they are. Maybe they're just not the greatest fantasy ruckman, but they're generally underpriced. They're mid prices, so you're really looking for that breakout season. They present both value and they're going to present cash generation. So from a cash generation, they're great, but you're pretty much banking on them being solid for you for the start of the season. Then hopefully you're going to jump off to the top line guys, or you're even hoping that they're going to become those top line guys for the rest of the season. It can be extremely risky, like I said, if there was something to go wrong. Where are you getting the money from to jump up to these guys? Like I said, you don't want to be on this merry-go-round where you're going, one guy to the next best, and then you kind of have to jump off that guy to get to the next guy. That's the top line. You'd really just want to go, okay, this guy didn't work for me. I want to go to the top of the tree and just be set and ready for the rest of the season. You don't want to be jumping around too much because that can really hurt your season, because a lot of other people will be upgrading their team while you're messing around with your ruckman. So it is the riskiest of the strategies, but it can also really pay off if both things go well. Obviously from a cash generation point of view, points per dollar on field as well. If you're not spending up in your ruck line, you're spending up elsewhere, and you're going to provide points, gain a points advantage elsewhere on the field. So it is the riskiest of the lot, and I've heard a little bit so far this season about running a value ruck line. I've definitely considered it, but it's not something that I am hugely on top of just yet, just because I don't think it's the wisest move. Sorry. It probably leads me into what my ruck setup is currently. So I'll just go through my thought process of when this whole fantasy thing started. So my ruck setup at the start of the season was just set and forget. I was pretty comfortable with that. I was pretty set on starting Cherry this season, just with the way he finished last season. Back into the season, he averaged like 125. Just looked like he took it to a new level. And without really too much research, I just threw Marshall in there. I had the money left on the field, so I just threw him in there without much research. So I was pretty comfortable with that. Since then, and since recent news, I have changed that. I did remove Cherry due to his tough fixture, mainly because I thought he would drop in value quite quickly to start in the first month or half, just with some tougher matchups. So I wasn't super keen on it anymore. And I replaced him with Tom de Koning just because, again, more research showed that he definitely has all the signs that he's going to break out this year. Just given that he should get a solo ruck role at Colton. So that's one that I'm really bullish on, and he's currently in my side. So this looked a lot more towards that one primo and one value option. So really changing the structure of my team a lot. I preferred Marshall over Cherry just based off early season run. As I said, Marshall had a great run to start the season. I think he has like 5 or 6 matches to start the season where he averaged over 130 against his opponents last season. So he could be a massive captain option to start the season over a Cherry. But with recent news, I have moved Marshall out of my forward line, my ruck line, due to Marshall's injury, which I will elaborate a little bit more on soon. And I did replace him back with Cherry. So this is my current lineup with Cherry R1 and de Koning R2. I have played with the idea, like I said, with the 2 value rucks. I'm really quite bullish on what a Sean Darcy could do, given what he's capable of when he's full fitness. But again, he's not certain to play round 1 at this point in time, so I'm not quite sure about where I sit on that one just yet. I have played around with structures with that, and I highly recommend you guys do that too. If things change and things develop, then you've got a plan B, have these different structures in your head. But I just don't trust it at this point in time. He is in Doha getting some more rehab done on his knee, so there's no guarantee he's going to be there at round 1, so I'm not putting too much energy in it at this point in time. So the other thing I found was I was actually really struggling to spend all the money around the field. I'm not spending up in the ruck line. Then where's this money going? I'm not really bullish on too many of the midfielders. There's so much value in there at the moment that I really want to go quite mid-price heavy in there, and trying to limit how many rookies I've got, because again, rookies, as the season goes on, as this preseason develops, we're getting less and less rookies that are looking likely to be ready for round 1. So I'm starting to reduce them as we go. Again, forward line, we have a lot of value. Yes, we lost Filippo now due to his injury. He's out for 12 weeks and probably missing a good month or 2 months at the start of the season. So that probably makes us pay up a little bit more, but there are still plenty of value options in the forward line for us to consider. A Sanders is one that I've been looking at quite significantly, and what I think a lot of the community have jumped on so far. Defense is probably the one where I could spend up a little bit. We were really struggling in the defense line, but with Callum Mills and Coleman even looking a little bit more likely to start again, so there's not a huge amount of options to be able to spend up in each line. Like defense is probably the one where I would spend up a little bit. You can pay out for a Sheasel if you're confident on him or something like that. But there's just it doesn't feel right to pay up for those guys that when they're probably going to drop in average. So it doesn't feel super right to me. So this is where I feel comfortable at the moment, and this is probably likely where I'll start the season, but there's still plenty of water to go under the bridge so far. That's probably it in terms of a strategy chat, 15 minutes, and we're just getting into the players. I do apologize, I do ramble a fair bit. But we'll start at the top of the tree, and you've got to start with Rowan Marshall, top of the dogs. He's probably one of 3 primos that I'd consider. My primos I would consider was Rowan Marshall, Cherry, and Max Scorn. I all think they have the capacity to be top two ruckmen. Each one of them showed that they have the capacity and the potential to be there at different stages in last season. So definitely got to look at them individually, and could be easily your top primo start the season. Obviously, Cherry is the most popular, with Marshall closely behind, and Max Gorn nowhere near at this point in time. But definitely want to look at all of them. But back onto Royal Marshall, I've got to stay off the top that he does have a pelvic stress fracture at the moment, so that does have him on a modified training program for 5 to 8 weeks. So that means he's going to be having a little bit of an interrupted preseason. So that is a bit of a red flag to say that I'm not super keen on starting him, but it's not absolutely ruling him out. He is a very professional footballer. We have seen him in the past; he does push through these injuries quite well. You'd only have to look through last season where he had a bad ankle issue and he played through all the games last season and still put up some very capable fantasy scores for us. So not always good to jump at shadows, as what I've learned last season. So still not writing him off, but definitely is a bit of a flag to say that he's not going to be there for round one just yet. They're hopeful that he will be, but there's no guarantee. But in terms of the pros of starting him, he's been the clear number one ruck of the competition for the last 2 years. Like I said, he's gone back to back 115 plus averages. I think it was 117 each year. Now they've got rid of Campbell as the backup ruck. He doesn't have that worry at the moment, but however, there are rumours that he will spend more time forward in 2025. I think Ross Lyon has openly come out and said that they want him to spend more time up forward. So does that mean that they're going to bring in a second ruckman to play alongside Royal Marshall, which would obviously significantly drop his average? We have seen that in the past with a Paddy Ryder and even a Tom Campbell when he's come in for his couple games here and there. So that would obviously be a huge red flag if that was to occur. And they have recruited a mature-aged Harry Boyd from the AAS NFL. So he's actually absolutely dominating the ruck, and I'll talk about him a little bit later, but he's definitely one that could come into the side to start the season. So there is a bit of a concern. It's a bit of wait and see. So a bit of a worry there, but we'll have to wait and see on what happens. In terms of what his potential is, there is an argument to say that he is undervalued at 117, which is ridiculous to say. Like I said, he did have a bit of an injury-affected game in round 6 and round 7. What's probably the best way of showing you that? It doesn't show you there. It doesn't matter. He had 2 games where he scored 62 and 73, where he was just really didn't look like himself. He had a bit of a knee and an ankle issue. I don't think we really got confirmation of what it was, but it was. He just really didn't look like he was himself. He was hobbling around a fair bit. He's spending a bit more time around the ground. So if we were to remove those scores, he averaged 122 for the year. So that shows that he has some potential to push that 120 barrier for the entire season if he gets a clean bill of health for it. The pro as well, he's still 29. He's still quite young. He's still in his prime of what his capacity is as a ruckman is. So he's not going to have too many injuries creeping in just yet. He only went under 100 on 3 occasions, excluding those injuries as well. So it shows that he's very capable and a very consistent ruckman. So one you could pretty much rely on week in, week out to be a captain option. Like I said, he has an awesome run to the start of the season. I can even show you that. This one, so by far probably has one of the best runs to start the season, or even throughout the entire season. So he goes Adelaide, Geelong, Richmond, Port Adelaide, GWS, and Western Bulldogs to start for the first 6 weeks. Then he, even after that, Fremantle, Carlton, West Coast Eagles, not long after. So his first half of the season is just monstrous. So that's why I was quite bullish to start him, but this injury has scared me off a little bit. I would really like to have him. It's just I'm not sure if he's going to get up there just yet. So I am planning not to have him at this stage. I can even read out some of those scores that he had against those opponents and show you that he did average like 130 against these guys. So he scored a 150 against O'Brien. He scored a 131 and a 118 against Reece Stanley, a 140 and a 136 against Nankervis, a 119 against Sweet, and a 138 against what's his name, Briggs. So he is more than capable of absolutely ripping into these guys and has very good history against them. He just plays well. So I can easily see him averaging over 130 in the first 5 weeks, and even if it could even be close to 130 for the first half of the season. So that's why I was pretty bullish on him. And you know how I go, guys, with the fixture. I really rely pretty heavily on that, even though it's not the most reliable data at this point in time because there are changes that are happening. Teams become more restrictive over the preseason with game style changes and whatnot. But this is the best we can go off of, and I'm pretty confident that he will be one that flies off the radar so quickly to start the season. And I don't see him dipping in his price tag in the first half of the season. It could be, but in saying that, with the injury concerns, it's probably not a good, wise move to jump at Shadows. Like I said, you're not going to write him off just because of this injury and the fact that he's going to have an interrupted preseason. He is still training. He's just on a modified program, so he should still be match fit. It's just that he will be less contact training, if that makes sense. So he won't be hitting too many packs and doing too much ruck work, I would say. So he should still be match fitness. It's just it could have limited game time. I would like to still see him play some practice games in the community series game, but I feel like it'll be unlikely at this stage unless things start to turn his way. But I could definitely pay off you if you just say, don't worry about it, don't jump for the Shadows, just jump on him. He could be quite lowly owned. Like I said, he is a very professional footballer and could get off to a flyer. So he's still one hugely on my radar and one that I'm potentially looking at starting. Just need to wait and see what happens a little bit later on. Moving on to the second ruckman, and rightly so, that is Tristan Cherry. Average 114, priced at 1.175 million, second highest fantasy player at the moment in the second ruck. So we all know what happened in 2024. He had a massive breakout season, increasing his average from 66 to 114 after getting that solo ruck role. And it comes as no surprise that this guy could potentially present some value just with the fact that he had a massive second half of the season where he really just kicked it up a notch. I can show you probably some of his scores here. He went at 125 to finish off the season in the second half, so he just went absolutely ballistic. You can see some of the scores, like 3 150s back to back to back. Huge captain option for us. He's currently 54% owned, sorry. So there's probably an argument to say you just follow the pack, you follow where everyone else is going to be, because that's the safe option. And that's where I could see myself going. It's probably the safe play that, everyone else is going to be there. It's probably the most safe option as well, given that he hasn't had an injury concern yet. Fingers crossed that nothing occurs. And he's got no real competition in terms of that solo ruck role. He's by far the best ruckman that they have, and they don't really have the options around him, I would think. So he's got the safest job security. He's also going to be the next ruck pig, in my opinion. I think he quite easily can go closer to 120 to this season, so that's 5.5 points of value off the top. But that's probably where my bullishness stops for him. My concerns really start to creep in is that he has a really tough run to start the season. I'll go and show you that. North are here. So he's got a nice one to start the season in Tim English, but then he goes Maxi Gorn, Tim O'Brien, Brodie Grundy, and Jared Witts, which are very tough ruckmen to still score against. Even if I read you out some of his scores, he scored a 99 against Max, a 83 against O'Brien, a 94 against Grundy, and then he went a 57 against the like of Witts. So I will say a lot of those scores did come from the first half of the season where he was still probably working his way into it and really hadn't kicked it up that gear. That 57 is definitely one I probably wouldn't consider happen again. I just don't think he has that floor in him at all. So I think he's got a floor of like an 80. So that 57 is definitely one I wouldn't be considering too much. But it is enough of a flag to say that he probably will drop a bit of value to start the season, and there's potential that you could pick him up at a cheaper rate a couple weeks into the season. Probably could even push it out to the second half of the season where he really has a lot of a better run at this stage, but it is a long time to go without a player that is so highly owned at this point in time. So it is a huge risk. And is it enough to say that I preferred Marshall in that fact that, you're paying up this much for this ruckman, you probably want them to have all green lights to say go, and for me, he's just got that slight yellow to say that, like, he's actually probably going to drop a bit of value to start the season. So there's probably potential you pick him up later on. In saying that, I do think he's probably a bit better and probably going to improve slightly. I don't like to just speculate that he's going to have a natural progression. You know, his second year as a solo ruck, you can only assume he's going to get better. But I just want to go off the cold hard facts that, you know, this is the averages that he scored against them. For whatever reason, they're a tougher ruck matchup, so he may not be the best scoring to start the season. So may not be the captain option that we're looking for and that we want to pay out for at that point in time. So it is definitely one that you got to consider. But looking from a season-long perspective is definitely one that you could lock in, and that's probably the reason why he's in my team currently. Looking at it as a season-long perspective, it saves the trade. You know, I'm only having to probably spend a trade on Tom DeConing, getting him up to the likes of Royal Marshall if he's going to be that R2 or that R1, or even a Maxi Gorn if he comes back, or even a Tim English, which we'll get into in a second as well. We'll move on to the next one in Maxi Gorn. He's probably less likely to be talked about. He is only 7% owned at this current time. He does save you about 50k from a Royal Marshall, so he is a little bit cheaper, but not massively cheaper. I probably got to say off the top that he is also injured currently, or just coming out of his injury. He had a fractured voice box. I don't even want to try and say the technical term for that. But that was back in December, late December, so he was out of training for 6 weeks. So he was expected to return to full contact training end of January, so that's the 29th of January for anyone that's keeping reference. So he should be back at full training at the moment, and I could definitely see him being a top 2 ruckman in my eyes. You know, he's been a fantasy pick. Sorry, not a fantasy pick, a top ruckman for us for many years back in his prime. He has come off of his best fantasy season in a long time. You know, having a dual ruck set up for a pretty long period of time with Luke Jackson and Brody Grundy coming in the side as well. So I do think he has the capacity to go 120. You know, we only have to look back at the first half of last season where he was averaging 121 to start the season, like in that first half. Just look at these scores. Like he had 7 scores above 120. And a lot of them were over 140 as well. Like 4 scores above 140, and even got the 150 as well. So he knows how to have a massive ceiling, and when he's all fit and firing, doesn't matter if he's 33 now. He just still knows how to find the pill, and he's still a key pillar at Melbourne there for them. And with them expecting to probably be a bit worse potentially, it's depending on how you read the room. They could be getting a bit better, but could be getting a bit worse. They could even rely on him even more this season, so that could be more points for him. So I definitely could see him being a top 2 ruckman to finish off the season, especially with concerns that Marshall is going to be having another ruckman coming to the side. I don't think there's that much concern here with Maxi Gorn, even though Tom Campbell has gone to that side now. Probably just as depth. If Gorn has an injury here and there, they've got that depth. I don't think he'll actually be playing. Like I said, he's a huge captain option. So the concerns that I have with Max Gorn is that he really fell off in the back half of the season, which is probably mostly due to the fact that he had an injury. He had an ankle injury, which had him ruled out for 2 or 3 games, or 2 and a bit games there. He was also getting a lot more attention, like, you know, the West Coast Eagles game. Everyone was sort of just putting time into him, bumping off the ball, just really stopping him from getting to his position a lot of the time. So he wasn't able to get to the drop of the ball a lot of the time. So is that something that we're going to see a lot more often? Because he is a dominant player and one of the most dangerous players for Melbourne. So I can see that happening a fair bit more. Like I said, he is 33, so maybe he's going to experience a few more injuries. You know, he hasn't always had a lot of soft tissue injury, sorry, can't spit that out. So those could start to creep in a lot more as he's aging, but I think just with the ruckman role, as long as he can keep his knees quite healthy, then I think he'll be fine. So, and the other thing that concerns me is that the fixture to start off is quite tough as well. Just looking at it here, got Briggs start up, Cherry absolutely kill him. Witts first three are pretty tough. Then you go into Geelong, which is a nicer one. Then you go into Essendon, which is the hardest run to start the season. So it is pretty tough, and I do expect him to probably drop in value again. Again, you could probably pick him up at a late date cheaper. But like I said about Cherry, if you look at it from a full season-long perspective, then you probably have no dramas with that too much. I will say that there isn't a huge amount of green, though, in that. Even though they play each team at least once, there's not a whole lot of green in this at all. So there's no real big stretch of games for him to absolutely rack up. So I wouldn't know exactly when I'd be picking him up at this stage if I were to not start him. So definitely one I'll keep an eye on. But yeah, you definitely could provide a different option to the Cherry and Marshall if you're looking for to save a bit of coin, and definitely has the same potential. Just moving down the list here, as I'll do, English is probably the next one, and I'd class him as an underpriced premium. You know, he was at 118 average last season in his breakout 2023 run, where he averaged 118 for the year and was absolutely a godsend for us all. But he's down priced at 105 now, you know, less than 100, 1.1 mil. So he's not a huge amount. You can save, you know, 100k off of a Cherry here. And while he is potential to be a lot of value, I just don't see the narrative where he's going to increase back up to his season high. You know, he really struggled last season in 2024 with the new ruck rule, where you can stick your arm out and you can really defend off your ruck opponent, where previously it was just run and jump. So he's more of that ruckman that likes to run and jump and used his athletic ability and his height to get that hit out and run away from his opponent. Now he needs that upper body strength to be able to push his opponent off and be able to get that hit out, where he really struggled in that. I've went through the stats before where he dropped about 3 disposals on average, so that's 9 points, and then he went on to lose 4 hitouts per game as well, so that's his 13 points of decrease right there. So I just don't see a world where that's going to increase again, but it's definitely one, if he can look good in the preseason, then definitely one I could look to jump on, given that he is underpriced and could be that R1 for us. Definitely has a captain option. You know, we've seen his biggest scores before. I just need to see him get back to those heights again. So one to keep an eye on. I'm just not seeing it at this point in time. He's only 7% owned, so not many people are jumping on it, but definitely one that at his best can be a fantasy gun for us. The other thing is, I should have at the top, is that he is under an injury cloud as well. He's got an abdominal injury, so that's got him on a modified training program for an extended period of time. Not a huge amount of time, so it's probably not the biggest worry. I think he'll be right to go for the practice matches and match simulations and whatnot. So I think he'll definitely be there by round 1. It's just he does have a bit of an interrupted preseason, so hopefully we can get a look at him and get a bit of an insight of what his new ruck style is going to be like, and if he can increase back up to that fantasy best that we all know and love. I'll just keep going down the list and probably skip over a few names that I'm not super keen on. Nankervis, probably not too much value there. He is very expensive for what he is, and he's quite injury prone, so I'm probably not looking to pay up there, and neither is the fantasy community. Grundy, I had put a little bit more time into because, again, he has been the fantasy the fantasy pig for us previously at at Collingwood, where he averaged 120, so he has got the capacity to do that. And with a new coach, I could see a world where they rely on him a little bit more. He gets a bit more time on ground, because that was a bit of a struggle last year. So there is a world where I could see him being a lot better, but I'm just not having the confidence at this point in time. He also has a pretty tough run from memory to start the season. So he goes the Lions. He has Freo, which is a bit of an easy one. Then he has the early bye, which is a bit of a shame. Then he goes North and Pies. So not the best fantasy run. So I'm not super keen on him just yet. And paying $1 million for someone that isn't anywhere near the top guys at the moment, it definitely would be a bit of a stretch, and really looking for natural progression, which I'm really trying to stay away from at this point in time. Wits, definitely not. I think this is pretty much what he is, so there's no chance of him. Darcy Cameron, I'd say he's probably overpriced with the way that with Max Cox, what's his name? Mason Cox out of the side a lot last year, so his numbers probably inflated being that solo ruck for an extended period last season. Expecting Mason Cox to spend a lot more time on this side this season, so I think he will struggle. Let me just grab a drink, you guys. Briggs, have put a bit more time into Briggs because, again, probably one of the more safe options, have that solo ruck role. Young, 25, coming into his prime. He's been about that 90 guy for the last 2 seasons since he took the mantle at GWS. So definitely could see him pushing his average a lot closer to 100. But again, it's probably more of a natural progression sort of look. I'm not really seeing the stats to say that he's going to take that leap. So I really need to see a lot more from him to really pick him. And I really want the stats to back it up because it is a lot to pay for someone that traditionally hasn't been the most fantasy friendly scorer so far. So probably not too interested in him. Riley O'Brien, just no. I think he's probably in his last final seasons at the Crows anyway. Looking to probably change up a few things. Lloyd Meek, I did show a bit of interest as well. He is 3.8% owned, so a bit higher up there. Again, entering his prime. There are concerns that Ned Reeves is in the wings, breathing down his neck, that he could potentially come in, but I don't think that's the way they want to go. They like the way that Meek goes about it, so, and he just provides more around the ground as a target up forward and whatnot, so I think he's just a lock-in as the solo ruck. It's just what is his upside. I think he could probably push a lot closer to 95, even 100. We saw at the back end of the last season where he had an ultimate finals game against Tim English. He just absolutely bullied him and just was everywhere. So again, it would probably be more of a natural progression sort of look. I don't think the stats say that he's gonna absolutely kill it. Did only play 19 games. Well, only 19 games is a lot, but I don't think there's too much upside on what he's got right now. And Hawthorn as a whole sort of scared me off a little bit just with the way that they play the game. They're really looking to play that handball receive sort of look, so that really bypasses the likes of a ruckman quite quickly. So I just don't think having either of them, is quite a play at this point in time. So I'll pass on that. McInerney, no. Jordan Sweets. Oh, sorry, I did pass over to Koning. I'll talk about De Koning first because he is the next one to talk about. But this guy is the one that he's got all the right signs to say that he's going to have this breakout season, right? So he's got that breakout ruck role where, he's coming from a team that has traditionally played 2 rucks in the one team. Now they're looking to sort of transition to a solo ruck role where, we've all seen the stats where Tom De Koning played, I think, 9 games as solo ruck and they won 8 of the 9 of them. So it shows you that when they play the solo ruck, they're much more competitive and they have that speed and that new game style where they are free-flowing and not having a second tool. So I feel like he's definitely got all the signs that he's going to take the mantle and provide a lot of upside. He's priced at 88, so definitely falls within that mid-pricer category for me. Definitely not an understood price premium because he hasn't shown that aspect yet, but the thing I liked about him was when he was playing solo ruck during those 9 games, he averaged 102. So that's nearly 15 points of upside, and that was across 9 games as well. So definitely plenty of upside and pushes close to those primo guys. Probably 10 points unders, but going to be a lot close enough. And again, sky's really the limit of what this guy can be capable of if he was to get a lot more game time. He only played 9 games of solo ruck this season, so maybe next season with a little bit more under his belt, what he's capable of, will we wait and see. So where is he? There he is. So you can see some of the scores. He really had a big breakout game with 131 there against Geelong. So definitely has some upside and definitely has a good ceiling. It's just his floor is pretty embarrassing at the same time. So there is some risk to it, but definitely one that I'm keen to start on at the moment. Again, just really looking for that value. I like his run to start the season as well. I'll show you that. Probably one of the best start season. He goes Richmond, which is one of the easiest ruck lineups. Hawthorn give up plenty of points to Rucks. English as well. Debatable what happens next this season. Collingwood are a bit tougher with their 2 ruck lineup, and then you got West Coast Eagles. So a good 5-game stretch there. Even if you go out to Geelong, it's not a bad stretch. So you're not looking to have him for the entire season. Ideally, of course, you want him to last the entire season, but I think expecting him to be that top 2 ruck is unrealistic. So I'm making plans already to trade him out at some point when he sort of caps out at his top price, whether that's 102, 105, who knows, and moving on to that next big guy, whether that's a Marshall or a Gorn. Really just looking at the best time to transition from that player, and that definitely could be around 7. He does go on a bit of a tougher run for the next 5 or 6 weeks during the mid-season buys. So I could jump off of him and go on to the likes of a Marshall, who comes up against 3 decent ruck matchups and probably has a pretty good run to finish the season as well. Or we can even go the opposite way with a Max. Has also a pretty good run. Bit tougher in the middle part of the season, so probably not my preference, but definitely one to keep an eye on. Again, it really depends on how the season crumbles, but got to make these plans to trade these guys out, because I don't think they're one they're going to be keeping on to for the rest of the season. The real question about decoding is he going to get this ruck, so the ruck role? You got Pitton out there that's still at the club. There's a huge risk that he potentially still plays. They've quite frequently just gone, okay, the opponent has 2 ruckmen, Pitnet, get in there, do your thing, try and protect De Koning the best they can. But from match reports and all the match simulations I've been doing, it looks like De Koning is their preferred ruckman, and he's going to be solo ruck to start the season. Another year older, 25, maturing into his body a lot more. They're just probably going to throw him in the deep end a lot more and just trust him with the ruck setup. So that's why I'm pretty bullish on what he's capable of, and we're probably worth the risk of what we're looking to do with our structure, and probably frees up a bit of money to do elsewhere. And paying at 900k, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to be able to jump on these top line guys if things were to go wrong. Say we get 2 or 3 weeks in, just going back to that fixture again. We get to Collingwood, he's got 3 weeks where he has played solo ruck against all these guys, but then he comes against Collingwood and there's 2 ruck lineups with Mason Cox and Darcy Cameron. Then they throw Pitnet in. It's probably going to be one game where they throw Pitnet in, then he probably averages 60 or something, and it kills all his cash generation. So potentially you could jump off then, probably makes a bit of coin in that time. So there's definitely different ways of planning around it. So I'm just looking at all different scenarios of what could happen and reasons why I look to start him, and all signs are sort of saying that I'm really keen to start on this guy just because he has the potential, and signs are saying that this is the way that it's going to be. So I definitely have him in your side so far this preseason, until we know otherwise. Moving down the list again, now I'll talk about Sweet a little bit. I did speak about him a little bit before, but I just don't see a narrative where he's going to get much better this season. And don't get me wrong, I love Sweet. I was pretty bullish on him last season when he was priced way down at like 40 or 50, whatever it was. In his first season at Port, I thought he would easily become the first ruckman for them. But unfortunately, things didn't plan out the way I wanted it to, and Soldo became the first ruck option to start the season. And by the end of it, Sweet was obviously a much better ruckman. So, and he showed reason why. He's averaged to 82, so he's priced at 82 this season. And I would like to say his value, but when I looked at the stats, he averaged 85 in the back half of the season, where he played that full-time ruck role. I can show you his numbers here. Where's Port Adelaide? That one. Played that solo ruck role, from round 15 onwards. 75% ruck time plus, which is the ideal ruck split, if you want to say that. There was an injured game here and there, so his average is a little bit lower, but 3 points of value really isn't anything to scratch at, especially when he is, 20, 30 points off the top guys. It's going to hurt you quite significantly every single week. And you're sort of locking yourself into this world where you're in the structure of how do you get that guy up to a top line guy? You're spending 400k trying to get him up to the top line guy at some stage through the season. Not saying it's impossible, and I'm not saying he can't improve. It just seems to me it's more of a natural selection sort of pick, not natural selection, natural progression. because the stats really aren't there to say that he's going to improve massively from there. We know he's a VFL fantasy gun, as a ruckman. We're going to show you his numbers and they're massive, but that doesn't always translate to being the best AFL fantasy player for us. I think he's about where he's going to be. He can probably push closer to 90, but I don't expect him to have much more than that. Just given the way that Port Power play, again, they've got a lot of young talent in there, especially with Rosie, Butters, Horn Francis at his feet. Why would he get the ball in his hands rather than give it to those guys who are a lot more damaging than him? So he's probably used a lot more for his ruck work than his actual work around the ground. So I just don't see a world where he's really going to jump up and get to those triple figures that we probably need to see out of him to be a worthwhile pick at this 82 price tag. So not super bullish on him. I know some people are, but I'm just not quite there yet. Moving down the list, we're really into the mid prices now, so there's a lot of sketchy picks here, but Luke Jackson is another one that could be a sneaky option for us, with Sean Darcy being potentially out for an extended period of time, depending on how his rehab goes. There's no real time frame on when he's returning yet. Could he potentially be an option to start for the first month and a half or whatever it was going to be? We know when he has a solo ruck role, he's absolutely dominant in that position. He averages, what was it? Where is that number? 93 across 9 games in 2024. So he averaged 93 in 2024. So that's 15 points of value right there in what he's capable of as a solo ruck. And I think that only can be pushed up further if you think about it. So the only problem I see with starting Luke Jackson is he does have forward status, so you probably want him in your forward line a bit. Probably more likely to be in your forward line than he is in your ruck line, but could potentially be a play as a cheaper ruck. He is 100k cheaper than the likes of a De Koning, and if the likes of Sean Darcy's out, then he probably has no real competition for that solo ruck role. In saying that, though, Liam Reedy did come into the side in the final 2 games of the season last year, and he actually played the ruck number 1 ruck role, playing 60% ruck time over Jackson. So that could be a bit of concern. Do they really just see Jackson as a more of a forward than a ruck full timer? So is that something we're going to see a little bit more? So one to keep an eye on, but probably very unlikely given that Sean Darcy probably isn't as far away as it seems, and all the concerns that they have at Freo at the moment. But Freo are a very good side. Moving on to his teammate in Sean Darcy, he's definitely one that I'm a lot more bullish on this season if he can get his body right. Obviously priced at 78. He is currently in Doha, trying to continue his rehab on his knee, which he started early in August last season. So you'd think he'd be pretty close to being ready to go. I think it's really just getting those final touches, with the way that he plays and the way that he moves around the ground. So he has dropped a lot of weight as well, so it's only going to be beneficial to the way his knee problems, less weight on that knee when he's jumping and when he's rucking. I think it could definitely benefit him and probably helps him around the ground a little bit more. He's always been quite a fantasy-friendly ruckman for us. I think his best season was a 95 average, so if he can get back to that, he's potentially 17, 18 points of value instantly. Only played the 12 games in 2024 where he had 4 separate injuries, so he's definitely a much lower in terms of average due to those injury games, so expecting him to be a lot better. I think when I did the stats, if you remove those injured games, he's averaging 84, so that's 7-8 points of value straight away. Potentially up to 15, like I said. It's just a huge injury risk with his injury history, but has an awesome run to start the season. So I'll show you that here. Freo, so he goes to Long, Sydney, West Coast Eagles, Western Bulldogs, and Richmond. So 4 green start the season, and that's why I've probably been playing a little bit more with the value options in the ruck line. Going to Tom De Koning and a Sean Darcy. Both have awesome runs to start the season. I both think they can get off the flyer if they're fit and firing. It's just, again, if they're going to be there or not is the question, because being in Doha this late in the season, this preseason, probably isn't the greatest time to say that he is going to be ready for round one. They haven't ruled him out for Rio, but they say that they're really looking more long term for him in terms of his knee ability. So there's no guarantee that he's going to be there for round one. So probably not playing around with him too much in my side currently. But like I said, he's done all the right steps in terms of went to surgery pretty early in 2025 with had his surgery in early September. He missed out on the final 3 games of the season just so he could get that surgery out of the way and give him the best chance to play round one. So I would ideally like to see him play at least the AAMI Community Series game to give us some sort of indication and give us some confidence going to the season. If he doesn't play that game, then I'd probably much rule him out because I don't think I could just go into him without any sort of look at it, what he's capable of with this, drop in weight, his potentially a new ruck style with, his ACL and whatnot. So I wouldn't be jumping into him without seeing him first. So big watch still, but very unlikely at this point in time. Moving down the list, not looking at Soldo, not looking at Moyle, Pitnet we discussed really. You're not looking at any of these real guys. Matt Flynn's probably the next one that I'd look at as a real cheap option guy. 622k is by far the cheapest mid-price we'll probably get. He only played the 4 games in 2024, priced at 61. He really had a lot of injuries in 2024, coming over from GWS to West Coast. So the thing I like to see is that he potentially can push 75, if not 80, if he gets a solo ruck roll quite simply. I looked at his numbers of the waffle. It weren't amazing, but he was being pretty consistent at that sort of 80, 90 range. He's not the most mobile ruckman, but he's in a prime age of 27, so he definitely has potential to be much better. Very speculative pick. I'm probably not one to fly into it. I wouldn't really trust it at R2 at this point in time. I have heard the question of could you start him at R3 if he does get this solo ruck roll, and I'll say I probably haven't explored it too much, but definitely something that I will look into a little bit more. A lot of people started with Cherry at R3 last season at a very similar price range at this low 60, so it definitely has worked for other players. All those players probably didn't go on to win major hats or anything, but they were pretty close to it, so it's definitely a strategy you can go into it. I just feel like it's very unlikely that he's going to get this solo ruck roll with the likes of Bailey Williams, I believe his name is, being that solo ruck. I can show you his splits. West Coast Eagles, even when Finn was fit and playing, Bailey Williams is still in the side and it still took a lot of the ruck split. So it seems like they're probably just going to play a dual ruck split when both of them are healthy. So I just don't see it happening, and I think he's just going to stay quite consistent at where he's at. At the moment, maybe pushes 70 at best if he can get a full run at it this season. He doesn't have an injury so far this preseason, so he is having a pretty clean health run at it. So we'll wait and see if things develop here. So just want to keep an eye on him. And then the final guy I wanted to talk about, which is actually a rookie option, is Harry Boyd. I think he's probably been the pop name of recent since he got recruited for St Kilda as a mature age ruckman from the SANFL. Playing for the Redlegs. He has a fantasy gun, honestly. Looking at his numbers, he just goes phenomenal. And what makes me interested in him is just with this whole Marshall under an injury cloud, there's no certainty that he plays round one, so does Harry Boyd get thrown in there as a mature ager? He's been dominating the track so far, even beating the likes of Hull and Heath quite comfortably, so he probably slides in as the most likely to play that next ruck lineup, and even potentially longer than that, with all the rumours that they're looking to throw Marshall forward. Like I said, could Harry Boyd be that player that comes in and plays that main ruck role for them, or even at least have a 50-50 split, or even even less than that? He's a basement price player at 230k. I think absolutely be silly not to start with him and probably put him as your R3. I would be tempted to put him R2 just because, again, he's not proven and he's not confident to stay in the side permanently, I definitely would consider playing him at R3 for sure. And the question probably remains is, what do you do with, a lot of people are looking to play this red dot in that R3 position and really throw away that position because unlikely to have many. My stance so far this season is the fact that I'd probably like to go with 30 red dots to start round one. And that's probably a bit different the way I've done it in previous years, and what I learned last season is that, we've got these early round buys. So we're going to have these VC, what do you even call them, red dots, to be able to do those VC swaps and VC loops and whatnot to start the season. Yes, you're not going to be able to do it round one, but I think we can be pretty confident with the players that we select. You're looking at your cherries or your Marshalls or your merits or whoever you're looking at doing where they're big fantasy scorers. You can just throw the C on them. You can pretty comfortably say that they're going to probably get close to 100. Maybe not have a huge ceiling that you're looking for, but a comfortable 100 to start the season is definitely enough at that point, especially when you consider the cash generation that you could get from an R3 position over everyone else that isn't starting him. So when it comes to it, if he is playing round one, I would be looking to have 30 green dots in my team, and I'll just bank on the fact that, round 2, round 3, round 4, I'll have a buy player that I'll be able to throw the captaincy on and be able to VC loop throughout those rounds. And then by round 5, I'm more than likely a rookie's going to be dropped and I'll have a red dot at some stage. So that's the way I'm thinking about it at this point in time. This may change. It's still a little bit of water going to the bridge, but I don't think much will change so far. So definitely one I'm keeping on the books. And just look at the way he scores about it. He's in 2024, he averaged 116, which is absolutely massive. He only dropped below 100, I believe, once in the entire season, which was at 88. He loves to get free kicks to 4, which I saw as well. Probably won't get as many of those in the big game, but we'll wait and see. He loves a bit of a cuddle, so he reminds me a lot of a Cherry. Drops to his feet and just cuddles everybody. Also averages 20 disposals, so he's not afraid to get his hands on the ball. Whether he actually uses it well or not is up for debate, whether it have 40%, but we're not really here for that. That's the AFL coach's problem to deal with. But averages 4.4 tackles, over 20% disposals. 20 disposals. So definitely one I'm keeping an eye on because it can be a very good fantasy player for us, especially at that basement price. So definitely one you should have on your radar. I think that sort of really wraps it up, in my opinion. I'll just quickly scan through some more names. Really not seeing too much in here. When I did my research, I really didn't have too much more to say about these guys. Obviously, if you're going for that red dot, Max Heath could definitely be that one. Looks very unlikely. Livingstone as well, or Barnett, depending on the way you want to go about your structure. And that sort of does it about it for this video. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed. That is Harry Boyd down there for you. He doesn't have a silhouette, which is funny. But he is 26, so he's very mature. But that does it for today's video. Hopefully you have enjoyed, and hopefully you got some content out of this and gave you a bit more of an idea where you want to go with your structure to start the season. Again, still 43 days from fantasy starting, so there's plenty of water to go under the bridge. But yes, the Ruck lineup is very vital to the way we play fantasy. So yeah, hopefully you guys have enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Please leave a like and subscribe. Peace.